There seemed to be a misunderstanding. We need you to move to prioritize a VIP passenger, Flight attendant Emily Carter said, her tone firm but polite. Behind her stood Michelle Obama, elegant, composed, and silent. Seat in question? 2A, already occupied by Karoline Leavitt, a platinum member who had paid in full and checked in early. She calmly showed her credentials. This is my confirmed seat. Emily, this seat is typically reserved for passengers of significant influence. Whispers rippled through the cabin. That's Michelle Obama, someone muttered. She deserves the best. Karoline, once a White House press secretary, wasn't just any. She was en route to speak at a media conference. She chose 2A for the workspace, not the prestige. Built. Phones came out. Passengers murmured. She's a Trump person, someone whispered. Others voiced support for Michelle. Supervisor David Lawson soon arrived. We need you to move, he said, not requesting, ordering. Karoline stayed calm. This is my assigned seat. David leaned in. Perhaps you're unfamiliar with how our airline operates. We prioritize certain individuals. Phones of businesswoman nearby captured everything. Another passenger piped up, Miss Obama always sits there. Even Michelle Obama stayed neutral. Not speaking of the captain appeared. Michael Bennett, seasoned and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. My crew can reassign seats as needed, he said. Karoline didn't flinch. Captain, I booked this seat. I'm a platinum member, and I have every right to stay. David stepped in. Ma'am, if you remain uncooperative, we'll have to ask you to leave the flight. Karoline finally, her eyebrow lifted. Are you threatening to remove me for not giving up a seat I legally booked? The cabin fell. Everyone knew this was no longer about seating. It had become something else entirely. The question hung in the air. How could ejecting a passenger for keeping her confirmed seat be justified? Before the captain could respond, a nearby passenger jumped in. This is outrageous. Miss Obama is a national icon, she cried. Captain Bennett, sensing things spiraling, turned stern. Final warning. If you don't move, we'll call security. Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly took out her phone and hit record. I want to clarify, I'm being threatened with removal from my legally booked seat simply because someone else wants it. David Lawson lost his composure, lunging toward her phone. Filming is not allowed, he barked. Karoline pulled back. There's no federal law against recording unless it interferes with duties. I'm protecting my rights. Moments later, 2 security officers boarded the plane. The cabin fell silent. Ma'am, one officer said, we need you to leave the aircraft. Karoline remained composed. What airline policy did I violate? The officers exchanged glances. They had no clear answer. Captain Bennett finally responded, You're being removed for causing a disturbance. Even the words sounded hollow. Passengers murmured. Some shook their heads. Others recorded. Karoline stood slowly, gathering her belongings with dignity. Michelle Obama remained neutral, watching silently. But one passenger sneered, Trump's people don't belong in that seat. Another replied, she didn't do anything wrong. As Karoline walked past David, a passenger whispered, Thank you for handling this. Patriot Air will get praised online. Phones captured everything. Once off the plane, Karoline calmly pulled out her phone. Sarah, she said to her aide, get the media and legal teams ready. I was just ejected from a flight, and it's political bias. Nearby, the security officers now looked uneasy. One quietly reviewed the report and frowned. Ma'am, the details don't match what passengers are saying. This may have been a mistake. There was a misunderstanding, Karoline replied, voice steady, but not on my part. The officers apologized and retreated. Just then, a young woman approached. Miss Leavitt, she said, voice shaking, I left the plane. I recorded everything, from the moment they asked you to move to when that activist promised praise for the airline. She showed Karoline the footage. Karoline's eyes softened for the first time. Thank you, she said quietly. They exchanged contacts. What neither of them knew was that the video would soon go viral, viewed by millions, triggering a national media storm and putting Patriot Air under fire. Karoline, now back in strategist mode, was already moving to turn the injustice into action. On the plane, a different scene was unfolding. Michelle Obama had taken seat 2A, calm and composed. She hadn't asked for it. The crew gave it to her after pressure from a group of passengers. Emily Carter, a flight attendant, brought her champagne and apologized politely. "We want your flight to be perfect, Miss Obama." In the galley, Emily and fellow crew member David Lawson whispered, thinking they'd score good publicity, but they didn't realize what was coming. Suddenly, a panicked call came over the crew's radio. A Patriot Air manager shouted, "You knew who she was. Why did you let this happen?" The crew froze. They had known all along, Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. But they had bowed to political pressure, fearing backlash. Now it was backfiring. At Patriot Air's HQ in Virginia, CEO Robert Harrison was reviewing reports when PR director Laura Evans called, clearly shaken. "Sir, a video of Karoline being removed from this morning's flight is going viral." Robert brushed it off at first. "Just issue a standard statement." But Laura pressed, "It's different. The crew knew who she was. They gave her seat to Michelle Obama under pressure. And there's video showing them agreeing to a promise of media support." Robert went pale. Karoline Leavitt had influence over government travel contracts. Contracts Patriot Air was trying to win. "Send me the video," he said. When he watched it, horror replaced disbelief. It was all there, the removal, the condescension, the bias. Who was the passenger, he asked, though he already knew. "Karoline Leavitt," Laura confirmed. At Reagan National Airport, Karoline was in the VIP lounge, surrounded by her team, legal, communications, and her trusted aide, Sarah Mitchell. Laptops were open, phones were buzzing. The video had already hit 2 million views and was dominating headlines. Karoline said quietly, "They knew who I was, and still they gave in to pressure." Back at HQ, the crisis deepened. Robert's assistant entered with a phone. "Miss Leavitt's office is on the line." Robert answered and tried to apologize. "We deeply regret what happened." But Karoline's voice cut through, calm and firm. "The crew knew who I was. This isn't just personal. It's a serious concern, especially as you negotiate government contracts." The room went quiet. "I want an urgent meeting today," she added. That meeting happened within hours. Board members rushed in from homes and events. The tension was thick. Karoline entered the boardroom still in the same navy suit, a silent statement. With her were Sarah, the legal counsel, and a top comms advisor. Robert played the video on the large screen. Everything was there: the biased removal, the crew's weak excuses, and the promise of media support. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Robert tried again to apologize, but Karoline cut him off. "I'm not here for apologies. I have 2 demands. First, suspend the crew immediately. Second, I'll be recommending a review of your government contract." Robert tried to suggest a softer approach, but Karoline held firm. "This wasn't bad service, it was political discrimination. And it's on video. These employees have years of service and we have union agreements," Robert said. Karoline calmly placed her hands on the table. "This isn't a negotiation," she replied. "Take accountability, or I'll call for a full investigation by the Department of Transportation. Your government contract is at serious risk." Her words hit hard. Losing that contract would devastate Patriot Air. Suddenly, a young analyst burst into the room with a tablet. "Sir, the incident's tanking our stock. Down 12% and still falling. Analysts predict a 30% drop if we don't act fast." Robert stared at the screen, then at Karoline. It was no longer a scandal. It was a crisis. And the woman they kicked off the plane now held their future in her hands. 3 floors below, in a plane meeting room, Emily Carter, David Lawson, and Captain Michael Bennett waited, anxious. HR Director Ellen Brooks entered with legal counsel and 2 quiet security guards. "Let's be direct," Ellen said, placing 3 folders on the table. "Your contracts are terminated, effective immediately." The room fell into stunned silence. Emily covered her mouth to hide a sob. David clenched his fists, furious. Michael closed his eyes. "We were under pressure," David protested. Miss Leavitt was being difficult. Ellen turned her laptop to show the viral video. David's tone, Emily's unease, and Michael's evasions were all there. Plus the most damaging part, a passenger promising media support if they prioritized Michelle Obama. "You call this pressure?" Ellen asked coldly. "You knew who she was, and you chose bias." Emily finally broke down. "We made a mistake," she whispered. "I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop it." Michael muttered weakly, I trusted the crew's judgment. Ellen remained firm. You failed, both the company and basic decency. You'll be escorted out and receive 2 weeks severance, which is more than you deserve. As they left, they felt the same humiliation they had forced on Karoline. Justice served. Meanwhile, in Patriot Air's main auditorium, employees gathered for an emergency announcement. CEO Robert Harrison stood beside Karoline and her team. Today, Patriot failed a passenger in the most serious way, he began. This wasn't isolated. It reflects deeper issues we must fix. Karoline stepped forward. This isn't just about me. What happened would be just as wrong if I were a teacher or a student. This is about changing the culture. Employees listened quietly, some nodding, others ashamed. Then Robert made a shocking announcement. Patriot Air will pause all operations for 48 hours to begin company-wide training. Gasps filled the room. Shutting down for 2 days would cost millions, but it sent a clear message. Real change was starting now. In the weeks that followed, training centers opened nationwide. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, attended mandatory anti-bias training. Karoline showed up in person at several sessions. This is your chance to be part of the solution, she told them. What happened to me happens to people every day, people without a voice. For many, her presence was powerful. She wasn't seeking revenge, she wanted change. And her honesty made people listen. But outside Patriot Air, the fallout continued. Emily, David, and Michael found that in the digital age, accountability doesn't end when you walk out the door. Their names were now linked to bias in aviation, a reputation that no airline wanted to be part of. David sat in his apartment, surrounded by rejection emails. Their actions had consequences, and everyone now knew it. Thank you for your experience, but we've selected another candidate. Behind polite rejection emails, the truth was clear. No one wanted to hire those tied to the Patriot Air scandal. Emily Carter, once an 8-year flight attendant, was recognized mid-interview and quietly dismissed. David Lawson faced the same fate, his name now a warning in HR databases. Captain Michael Bennett, with decades in aviation, found even entry-level roles out of reach. Their moment of bias had eclipsed their careers. Even the passenger who promised media support wasn't spared. Banned from Patriot Air for life, she also faced scrutiny at work and social backlash. Actions once whispered in confidence now echoed across national news. Meanwhile, Patriot Air began a full transformation. A zero-tolerance policy on political bias was enacted, seating dispute procedures were reformed, and employees were trained to reject inducements of any kind. Change was visible. Passengers noticed fairer treatment. It finally feels like everyone gets respect, not just those with the right politics, one traveler said. 6 months later, Patriot Air had not only recovered, it thrived. Passenger traffic rose 12%, employee satisfaction hit new highs, and independent audits confirmed the change was real. But the most surprising turn came when Karoline Leavitt launched the White House-backed Second Chance program, a retraining initiative for those who lost jobs due to bias-related incidents. Emily, David, and Michael joined. It wasn't easy. David, once defiant, admitted, "I never thought I was biased, until I saw how subtly it shaped my choices." Emily faced her fear of speaking up. Michael confronted decades of misplaced trust and hierarchy. They didn't erase their mistakes, but they grew from them. Emily found a new role at a regional airport. David, now a baggage handler, worked to prove he'd changed. Michael became an instructor in the program, helping others avoid his failures. In a final meeting between Karoline and CEO Robert Harrison, the two reviewed the airline's progress. Change doesn't come from comfort, Karoline said. It comes from confrontation. They shook hands, not as enemies, but as allies in reform. The story of Patriot Air and Karoline Leavitt became a national lesson. Justice isn't only punishment, it's progress. In a divided society, fairness matters more than political sides. When injustice happens, fight it strategically, but also create paths for redemption. Subscribe for more true stories of justice, justice, unity, and second chances. See you in the next video.